Chapter 1977. From now on, I'll be in charge of all matters concerning the family. Jun Jiuqing's words instantly caused an uproar among the crowd. Everyone was shocked and looked at each other in dismay. Jun Jiuqing was going to inherit the position of the family head at this time? Wasn't this too sudden? Young master, the succession of the position of the family head has always required the previous family head to personally confer it and hold a grand ceremony. Now that the family head is still trapped in the peach blossom dock, it's a special time, so it's only natural that we have to do something special. Jun Jiuqing calmly interrupted the other party. His tone was firm. Now that the family is in danger, the most important thing is to mobilize the entire family to save the family head. Another person couldn't help but say, "But now that you're the young master and the family head isn't around, you have the same authority as the family head." Jun Jiuqing suddenly laughed. "Oh, is it really the same?" This rhetorical question left the other person speechless. The rest of the crowd fell silent. The young master and the family head had different statuses. Naturally, the authority in their hands was different. Even if Jun Jiuqing was the young master, he still had no authority over many people and matters in the family. Only by becoming the family head could he have complete control over the family. However, many people in the family were unwilling to accept this. Even though Jun Jiuqing was the young master personally chosen by Wentao. But his surname was Jun after all. Jun Jiuqing. How could such a person become the family head of the family? The reason why the crowd didn't openly object before was mainly because this was the person chosen by Wentao. They originally thought that they would make do with it until the right time to think of a way to pull Jun Jiuqing down. After all, there were some outstanding people among the younger generation of the family. Why would they have to accept an outsider like Jun Jiuqing? Who would have thought that something would happen to Wentao before that day even arrived? On the other hand, Jun Jiuqing was even more ruthless. At this time, he directly proposed to take over the position of the family head. I'm sure I don't need to tell you about the family's current situation, everyone should be well aware of it. Jun Jiuqing's voice was as casual as usual, but it carried a strong pressure that could not be disobeyed. As for the reason why everyone disagrees, I also understand it very well. But at this time, the family's interests were the most important. If anyone wants to disregard the lives of the family and the hundreds and thousands of clansmen for their own selfish interests, then don't blame me for being impolite. With such a huge accusation, many people's faces paled. They wanted to say something but stopped. Listen to what he said. Those who didn't agree to his suggestions seemed to be betraying their families. But they couldn't find a reason to refute it. Jun Jiuqing's eyes scanned the crowd and finally curled up the corner of his mouth. Very good. Since everyone agrees, then, from today onwards, I will be the new family head of family 2 days later, I will personally go to Peach Blossom Cove. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Early in the morning, Chu Luiwei woke up. With a thought, she summoned the Sun Great Azure Axe. The huge black axe quietly floated in the air. It was covered with a thin layer of frost. This was the power that Zichen left behind to suppress the Sun Great Azure Axe. Because Chu Luiwei didn't have time to remove the connection between the Sun Great Azure Axe and Wentao, she was worried that it would cause trouble, so she simply continued to use this power to suppress it. What are you looking at? Rong Xiu, who had just finished his morning exercise, walked in and saw Chu Luiwei staring at the Sun Great Azure Axe. Chu Luiwei came back to her senses and looked at him. Nothing. I just want to see what kind of treasures the 10 great sacred artifacts are. It was already very impressive for an ordinary noble family to have one sacred artifact, but she had several in her hands. Even she herself felt that it was somewhat inconceivable. Upon hearing this, Rong Xiu's scarlet lips curved up. He walked over and kissed her lightly on the lips. What do you think? His smile still carried a hint of nonchalance and carefreeness. Chu Luiwei hesitated for a moment, as if she wanted to say something. Rong Xiu noticed and stared at her. His voice was low and pleasant, and he was very close to Chu Luiwei now. His warm breath landed on Chu Luiwei's face with a familiar cold fragrance. Chu Luiwei's face heated up. She coughed and pulled herself back from her thoughts. I think there's something wrong. Come and take a look. As she spoke, she summoned the heavenly square cauldron and the flowing cloud flying diagram. The three sacred artifacts floated side by side, emitting a faint pressure. Rong Xiu looked at them. You think there's something wrong with these things? Chu Luiwei hesitated for a moment and nodded. These three sacred artifacts seem to, she paused and frowned, as if she was considering how to speak. I think their auras are somewhat similar. She softened her voice and looked at Rong Xiu. What do you think? There was a moment of silence in the room. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. What do you mean? Chu Luiwei narrowed her eyes dangerously. You're also a weapon refiner. Don't tell me you can't tell. Rong Xiu's skill in weapon refinement had always been above hers. If even she could sense it, then he must be able to sense it too. Rong Xiu couldn't help but laugh and then nodded. That's right. These three sacred artifacts are indeed somewhat similar in some ways. Chu Luiwei's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Do you know why? She always felt that Rong Xiu seemed to have an extraordinary understanding of many things. So this time, she still felt that he should know something. As expected, Rong Xiu nodded. He suddenly turned his head and looked at Chu Luiwei. A faint smile appeared on his noble and incomparable face. They were made by the same weapon refiner. Naturally, their auras are somewhat similar. For a moment, Chu Luiwei didn't even realize what he meant. After a while, she sucked in a breath of cold air. You mean these three were made by the same weapon refiner? Rong Xiu pondered for a moment. It should be. 5 of the 10 great sacred artifacts were made by the same person. Digression, 6:00. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1978. Chu Luiwei was shocked at first, but then she asked subconsciously, Who? Rong Xiu pondered for a moment and explained. Rumor has it that he was a blacksmith from 10,000 years ago. He was extremely talented and powerful. People don't know his specific name, so they only call him Mr. Su. After leaving behind these 5 sacred artifacts, he disappeared without a trace. Chu Luiwei suddenly thought of something and continued to ask, What about the remaining 5? Could it be? Rong Xiu looked at her with a smile. That's right. The remaining 5 were refined by another person. And this person was very famous. He was the top blacksmith in the Divine Ruins world at that time, Tang Ke. Chu Luiwei had heard of this name before. In other words, almost all blacksmiths knew this person. Tang Ke was born in an ordinary clan, but he was extremely talented in blacksmithing. After he became famous, his entire clan became one of the most powerful clans at that time because of him. Unfortunately, there was one time when he was blacksmithing, and he was careless and had an accident. After his death, the Tang family also quickly declined and was eventually annihilated. However, Chu Luiwei didn't know that half of the 10 sacred artifacts were refined by Tang Ke. How do you know everything? Chu Luiwei muttered and asked the question in her heart. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. This matter is recorded in Smelt. Among the blacksmiths, almost everyone knows about it. You only know about it now? Smelt was considered an introductory book for blacksmiths in the Divine Ruins world. It recorded some very basic blacksmiths content, as well as the deeds of many powerful blacksmiths. Any cultivator who wanted to become a blacksmith would study it carefully. However, Chu Luiwei was an exception. She really hadn't read this book, because she only started to come into contact with blacksmiths after she went to Lingxiao College. At that time, the person who took her in was Rong Xiu. She was very talented and understood everything very quickly, so she directly skipped this most important part. So much so that even though she already had 3 saint artifacts in her possession, she still didn't know where they came from. Chu Luiwei touched his nose awkwardly. Ahem, you didn't say anything back then. Rong Xiu had helped her pick out a lot of related books, most of which were quite profound. She was busy researching those things all day long, so she didn't pay much attention to it. Rong Xiu raised his hand. There was a gentle smile in his almond-shaped eyes. All right, it's all my husband's fault. Chu Luiwei glared at him. Her watery eyes had a rare hint of innocence and charm. Rong Xiu's heart fluttered as he looked at her, and he pulled her into his embrace with his long arms. Actually, the 10 great sacred artifacts are indeed very interesting. At that time, Jianghu was already famous. She was the most prestigious artificer in the entire Divine Ruins world. Countless cultivators paid him a visit and offered their best services, all for the sake of asking him to refine a suitable divine artifact. But Jianghu's temper is very strange and she has very high requirements. Very few people can ask her to help. Chu Luiyue nodded. The status of artificers was extremely high, not to mention that she was one of the best. It was normal for such a person to be arrogant because of her talent. Later, Mr. Su suddenly appeared out of nowhere and personally challenged Jianghu to a competition to determine the winner. Rong Xiu held Chu Luiyue's slender white fingers and played with them. Jianghu didn't want to pay attention to such a nameless junior, but probably because no one had challenged her for too long, she finally chose to accept the challenge. The two of them have been competing for a total of 3 years. Chu Luiyue opened her eyes slightly. 3 years? Then the 10 saint artifacts. Rong Xiu smiled and nodded. The 10 saint artifacts were all refined in those 3 years. Chu Luiyue sucked in a breath of cold air. In 3 years, the two of them had each refined 5 saint artifacts. How much patience and energy did they have to spend? A saint artifact was of a higher level than a venerable artifact. It was extremely precious and difficult to refine. Even someone as powerful as the Great Ancestor could only refine a venerable one divine weapon to this day. He once said that he hadn't even touched the threshold of a saint artifact. But Jianghu and Mr. Su had not only refined it, but more than one. The two of them were considered to be tied in this battle. And Mr. Su's reputation rose from then on. But this person was very mysterious. Almost no one knew his name and appearance. And not long after, he disappeared. Half a year later, Jianghu passed away. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. It sounded like the ending of the two of them was a little inexplicable. After Jianghu's death, the Tang family was in chaos. Everyone eyed them covetously and attacked them in groups. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. Very soon, the Tang family declined. But the point was, the saint artifacts that everyone found in the Tang family were not 5, but 10. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Mr. Su's 5 saint artifacts are also, that's right. The 10 saint artifacts refined by the two of them were actually taken back by Jianghu. It's just that no one knew about this matter. After the Tang family fell, the world knew about it. And in order to compete for the 10 saint artifacts, the families fought again. After a chaotic battle, some of the 10 saint artifacts were forcibly snatched and kept for themselves. Some were lost and their whereabouts were unknown since then. And because no one had successfully refined a new saint artifact from then on, those 10 saint artifacts were called the 10 great saint artifacts. So, the so-called ranking is also decided by the descendants? Rong Xiu smiled and nodded. Actually, there's no ranking. Since they're all saint artifacts, there's not much difference between them. It's just that they specialize in different things. Moreover, an item of this grade would display different powers in different people's hands. Isn't that the same with your flowing cloud flying diagram? The Nan family carefully kept the flowing cloud flying diagram for so many years, but they never really understood it. On the contrary, Chu Luiyue became the new owner of the flowing cloud flying diagram as soon as he got it. It's not that the flowing cloud flying diagram's combat power is insufficient, it's just that the people of the Nan family didn't notice it. Who knew if the other saint artifacts were the same? Chu Luiyue looked at the 3 saint artifacts in front of him and narrowed his eyes. Then these three items were all made by Mr. Su. Rong Xiu said. Although no one had personally witnessed the battle between Jianghu and Mr. Su, the world still knew who had created those divine weapons. Chu Luiyue nodded thoughtfully. No wonder he felt that the aura on them was somewhat similar. It turned out that they really came from the same source. Knock knock. Just as Chu Luiyue was lost in thought, there was a sudden knock on the door. Your Highness, Princess, someone from the family is here. It was Yan Qing's voice. Chu Luiwei stood up from Rong Xiu's arms, put away the 3 saint artifacts, and walked out of the door. Rong Xiu also followed. "Who's here?" Chu Luiwei asked. Yan Qing's expression changed slightly, and he bowed his head. "Someone, the head of the family, Jun Jiuqing." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1979. The head of the family. Chu Luiwei raised her eyebrows slightly and chewed on these words with interest. "He's really fast." She had long expected that Jun Jiuqing would not sit still after returning, but she did not expect him to react so quickly. It had only been 3 days, but he had changed from the young master to the head of the family. His identity was actually a little sensitive in the family. Chu Luiwei could tell that the people of the family were not completely respectful and convinced of him. Under such circumstances, he must have used some tricks to become the head of the family so quickly. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes dangerously and smiled faintly. Wentao is trapped in the peach blossom dock and his arms have been chopped off. He is no different from a disabled person. In addition, he lost miserably in the battle with you and lost face. Even if he could return to the family he obviously could not be the head of the family. The family was like a dragon without a head, so it was a good time to take over. As the young master, Jun Jiuqing had the advantage. Moreover, he had Wentao's endorsement. It was not difficult for him to win this round. Chu Luiwei turned to look at him and blinked. "My husband." "Do you smell vinegar?" Chu Luiwei wrinkled her nose slightly and raised her hand to fan it. "Where did it come from?" Before she could finish her sentence, Rong Xiu had already put his arm around her waist. "I don't mind carrying you there." Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. It seemed that if Chu Luiwei continued to speak, he really intended to carry her away. Chu Luiwei immediately shut her mouth obediently. She pursed her lips slightly and made a zipper over her mouth. According to her understanding of Rong Xiu, he was really capable of doing such a thing. Rong Xiu nodded with satisfaction, pulled her hand down, and bent down to kiss her red lips. "Then your husband will go with Madam." When Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu arrived at the city gate again, Jun Jiuqing was already waiting outside the barrier for a while. Behind him were 2 elders. Compared to the previous battle formation, it was indeed much weaker. That's how it should be. They were the losers. Today, they were the ones who brought the items to redeem their people. Naturally, they were inferior in terms of imposing manner. The 2 elders behind him had mixed feelings when they saw that the place had been cleaned up. If he hadn't personally experienced it, no one would have thought that an intense battle had broken out here 3 days ago. It was also here that Family Yi's reputation was swept to the ground and she was humiliated. When they thought about what they were here for today, the 2 of them felt even more awkward. Family Yi was used to being high and mighty. Who could bear to fall after one move? However, Jun Jiuqing stood there with a calm expression. There was no sign of embarrassment on his face. Only when he saw Rong Xiu and Chu Luiwei holding hands and walking over together, a hint of emotion flashed across his eyes. Chu Luiwei looked him up and down. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that Jun Jiuqing's aura seemed to be stronger than before. "I haven't seen you for a few days, but I don't know how to address you." The current Jun Jiuqing was the head of Family Yi, but his surname was Jun. Jun Jiuqing's expression didn't change. "It's just a surname. It's not very important. Master you can just call me Master Family." He calmed himself down and continued, "I'm sorry. Today, I've come to keep the appointment. The 30 venerable divine artifacts are all here." As he spoke, he took off the interspatial ring in his hand and threw it over. Rong Xiu raised his chin. "Yan Qing." Yan Qing immediately stepped forward and caught the interspatial ring. This interspatial ring was ownerless, so Yan Qing easily counted the things inside. After confirming that there was no problem, she handed it over with both hands. "Princess, 30 pieces, no more, no less." Chu Luiwei took the interspatial ring, quickly checked it, and nodded in satisfaction. "Please invite the head of family." "Oh no, the former head of Family E here." "Digression, I'll be back at 7 o'clock. Mobile users, Please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1980. Tao had been locked up in the dungeon for the past 3 days. He was a god after all, so his recovery ability was pretty good. Although he had lost both his arms, at least he was still alive. Of course, this was also at Chu Liyue's behest. She was planning to sell Tao for a good price, so of course she had to take good care of him. Therefore, during this period, Tao was not deliberately mistreated. On the contrary, he was treated quite well. But now, Tao only felt that this was a mockery and humiliation to him. The 3 days were long and torturous. Each day felt like a year to him. When he was brought out and saw Chu Liyue and Jun Jiuqing inside and outside the ward, the anger and resentment in his heart reached its peak. Chu Liyue shook the interspatial ring and said with a smile, Tao, the family really treats you with sincerity. They said that there were 30 pieces, and not a single one was missing. Moreover, all of them were of high grade. If I had to find a way to raise them myself, I don't know how much time and effort it would take. Thank you very much. Tao was filled with hatred, but he did not say anything. He just looked deeply at Chu Liyue and closed his eyes. After a few days, he had become much more haggard. There were still mottled bloodstains on his face, and he looked very miserable. Anyone who saw him would find it hard to believe that this was the former high-spirited head of the family Chu Liyue lifted her chin slightly, and the 2 people behind Tao were about to escort Tao away. I can walk on my own. Tao finally opened his mouth and opened his eyes. Deep resentment flashed in his eyes. The 2 people looked at Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue nodded indifferently and said with a smile, if he wants to walk on his own, let him. After all, he's the previous head of family. We have to give him some face. Tao had just taken a step forward when he heard this. He stopped abruptly and looked at Chu Liyue in disbelief. Previous patriarch? What was the meaning of this? The next moment, he seemed to have realized something. He turned his neck stiffly and looked at Jun Jiuqing. He didn't need to ask to know what had happened. Jun Jiuqing actually took advantage of these few days to directly rise to the top? Yes, of course he would do that. This was the best time to begin with. Tao could not help but smile bitterly. What was he still dreaming about? Now that he had returned to family it was impossible for him to be the same as before. And all of this was thanks to Chu Liyue. Tao. Rong Xiu suddenly spoke and his voice was calm. I had always thought that you were a smart person. Tao's face was pale. Now, he finally understood why Rong Xiu had not made a move. He had long expected this day to come. He did it on purpose. Tao's chest shook. He spat out a mouthful of blood and almost fell to the ground. Patriarch, Jun Jiuqing frowned. Tao laughed sarcastically. Yes, he was not dead yet. The family would still address him as patriarch. However, the way he addressed her as patriarch was completely different from before. He took a deep breath and forced down the thick taste of blood between his lips and teeth. He forced himself to continue walking forward. The surroundings were silent. Everyone's eyes were focused on Tao. Everyone had different thoughts. Tao felt as if there was a knife on his back. However, he knew that the more angry and resentful he was, the more he had to calm down. Step by step, he slowly and steadily walked to the edge of the barrier. Ripples spread out from the surface of the rock. An exit slowly appeared. Tao closed his eyes. Just a few days ago, he was still thinking about how to break this barrier. He did not expect that in the blink of an eye he would be reduced to such a state. He waved away all the messy thoughts in his mind and finally walked out. The 2 elders standing behind Jun Jiuqing immediately stepped forward to support him. However, Tao nailed them to the ground with a look. Although he was now the previous patriarch of the family and was almost a cripple, he had been in this position for too long and had accumulated a lot of pressure. Even if he did not speak, his pressure was still there. Jun Jiuqing's eyes moved slightly, and his voice turned cold. What are you waiting for? Can't you see that the patriarch is seriously injured and needs help? Although he was young, his words were dignified without being angry. They carried an awe-inspiring pressure that made people subconsciously obey. The two elders looked at each other and saw the difficult look in each other's eyes. This Yi Wentao clearly meant that he did not need anyone's help. Jun Jiuqing's words at this time, wasn't it obvious that he was deliberately going against him? Yi Wentao did not expect Jun Jiuqing to do this. He was shocked and angry. This kid, how could he be so scheming? On the surface, this was just a matter of words. However, in reality, it was a power struggle between the old and new patriarchs. The atmosphere froze for a moment. The two elders finally made up their minds and walked toward Yi Wentao. This choice was actually very easy to make. One was the new patriarch with top-notch talent and strength, while the other was the old patriarch who had become a cripple and had even caused the entire family Yi to suffer great humiliation. Who would rule the family Yi in the future? Wasn't it obvious at a glance? Yi Wentao's heart turned cold. He knew very well that if he did not have any other trump cards, he would be trampled under others' feet forever. Sometimes, falling from the clouds to the quagmire was just the price of making a wrong choice. Yi Wentao. Chu Luiyue suddenly opened her mouth and called out to him. Yi Wentao snapped out of his daze and turned his head to look at her. Chu Luiyue's lips curved slightly and her eyes curved. However, the corners of her eyes and the tips of her brows revealed a bone-chilling coldness. She said word by word, "I hate it when people rob me of my things." Everything that happened today was what he deserved. Yi Wentao's chest and abdomen seemed to be on fire, almost driving him crazy. He forced himself to retract his gaze. Now that he had fallen to such a state, there was no need to continue listening to these words. Besides, Chu Luiyue did not seem to care about his cold reaction and continued, "What you want to rob is clearly not Peach Blossom Cove, but you use this as an excuse to deceive the entire family Yi into paying for you. Yi Wentao, you really have a good plan." Yi Wentao's heart skipped a beat. His eyes were filled with disbelief. She knew? She knew. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1981. After Chu Luiyue finished speaking, everyone present turned to look at Yi Wentao. Especially the two elders standing beside him, their faces were filled with bewilderment and suspicion. Family head was not here for Peach Blossom Dock? What else could he be here for? Was there anything more precious than Peach Blossom Dock here? However, at this point, Chu Luiyue did not seem to have any reason to lie. The two elders looked at each other suspiciously. If Yi Wentao had really sacrificed family Yi for his own personal gain, then, dead silence, the surrounding space became suffocating. For a moment, Yi Wentao was confused. He forcefully suppressed the urge to turn around and lowered his eyes slightly, hiding all the ripples in his eyes. After a while, he said coldly and hurriedly, "I don't know what you're talking about." After that, he continued walking forward, as if he did not want to pay attention to Chu Luiyue's nonsense. Chu Luiyue shrugged. "Family, it doesn't matter if you know or not. Anyway, from now on, you just need to understand that you should never covet something that is not yours. Otherwise, next time, I can't guarantee that family E will not pay a greater price for your life." Every word of these two sentences was like a steel needle, piercing Yi Wentao's heart so hard that it was almost a bloody mess. He walked stiffly to Jun Jiuqing's side. The two of them looked at each other. Jun Jiuqing narrowed his eyes slightly, as if he was thinking about something. Yi Wentao's heart skipped a beat. Did Jun Jiuqing believe Chu Luiyue's words? Just as his heart was filled with bewilderment, Jun Jiuqing laughed again. "It's great that family head can return safely. Let's go back now." As he spoke, his attitude was respectful and polite. It was as if the undercurrent was all an illusion. Yi Wentao's heart sank. Only then did he realize that Jun Jiuqing was more ambitious than he had expected. His means were also stronger. He had chosen Jun Jiuqing as the young master because there was no one in the family Yi's younger generation who could compare to Jun Jiuqing. On the other hand, Jun Jiuqing had always been polite and respectful in front of him. Therefore, he was quite satisfied with Jun Jiuqing. In the end, he disregarded the family Yi's objections and gave him the position of young master. Who knew? That was all his disguise. Yi Wentao was certain that from the day Jun Jiuqing returned to family Yi, or even before that, He had been planning to rise to the top. However, it was already too late for him to understand this now. Yi Wentao could only hope that Chu Liuyue's words didn't make Jun Jiuqing suspicious. Even if he was suspicious, he didn't want to find out what was going on. He pretended to be calm and nodded. The group didn't say anything else and quickly left. After a while, their figures completely disappeared from sight. It seems that you're really sick of Yi Wentao. Rong Xiu suddenly spoke with a smile on his lips. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. Why do you say that? Rong Xiu bent his finger and gently tapped her forehead. You know the answer. When Yi Wentao left just now, she didn't have to say those words. But she still said it. Of course, it was because she didn't want Yi Wentao to go back and live a good life. Sometimes, as long as a seed of doubt was planted, it could easily destroy everything. Yi Wentao was already in a difficult situation. If she added fuel to the fire, it was easy to imagine what kind of situation he would face when he went back. Chu Luiyue blinked. You know me best, my husband. Yi Wentao was too greedy. He wanted the peach blossom dock and the armillary shield. How could there be such a good thing in the world? Everything that happened today was his own doing. This time, I can finally have some peace and quiet for a while. Chu Luiyue stretched herself. During this period of time, all kinds of things had happened. She hadn't had a good rest for a long time. Rong Xiu squeezed her hand, his eyes full of love. But he knew that these were all things that had to be done. How could it be so easy to have a place in the world of God? Moreover, if he interfered too much, it would inevitably make people think that she had relied on him and the Yuntian Tower to achieve what she had today. If that happened, it would undoubtedly erase her radiance. That wasn't the result that Rong Xiu wanted to see. Therefore, even if he wanted to intervene countless times, he still restrained himself in the end. Go back and have a good rest. Leave the rest to them. After this fierce battle, the Peach Blossom Dock indeed quickly regained its peace. Family Yi and the Nan family's crushing defeat made countless restless aristocratic families and clans give up. Chu Luiyue left most of the aftermath to Tsin Yi and Sanson. Sanson was very familiar with the Peach Blossom Dock, and Tsin Yi was even more skilled and resourceful. With the two of them working together, they quickly cleaned up the mess. The people of the Nan family who had been detained before, including Nan Yifan, were all executed. Nan Yifan's head was even hung outside the city gates for 3 days and 3 nights. This was Chu Liuyue's warning to the entire world of God. Logically speaking, the Nan family should be furious with such humiliation. But at this time, they didn't have the time to care about this. Because the entire Nan family had already sunk into an intense internal conflict. In addition, they had already lost several elders, and the family's strength had been greatly reduced. The current situation was one disaster after another. How could they care about anything else? 3 days later, in the room, Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged. She swallowed a pill and closed her eyes. The origin power in her body kept surging out of her dantian and into her limbs and bones. After a long time, she opened her eyes and let out a long breath. I've finally fully recovered, she muttered softly. Actually, the battle between her and Yi Wentao wasn't as simple as it seemed. Yi Wentao was a god, after all. Even though she had Zi Chen and Dumpling's help, she still suffered some internal injuries during the battle. Fortunately, it wasn't serious. Now that she had cultivated a divine body, her recovery was stronger than before. After a few days of recuperation, she was finally fully recovered. She stood up and planned to go out for a walk. The moment she opened the door, she saw Tsin Yi walking over. Tsin Yi stepped forward and bowed. Chu Luiyue looked at him in surprise. Tsin Yi? Why are you here? He should be at the Door Realm now. In the past, Peach Blossom Cove was a mixed bag of good and bad people. The Door Realm could be entered and exited as one pleased. After the Black Sword Sex people came, they occupied and controlled the Door Realm. Ever since the Black Sword Sex army was wiped out, Chu Luiyue transferred a group of people from the Yu residence to guard the Door Realm. Now that Peach Blossom Cove was on the right track, Chu Luiyue started to consider increasing the defenses of the Door Realm. Tsin Yi had received orders to investigate in the morning. She didn't expect him to return at noon. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1982. Sun Yi bowed slightly. Master, the situation in the Gate Realm is a little special. I'm afraid you'll have to go there personally. Chu Luiwei was stunned. Special situation? Wasn't it just a Gate Realm? What could be special about it? But seeing Sun Yi's serious expression, Chu Luiwei nodded. Okay. The reason why he sent Sun Yi was because he was proficient in all kinds of formations and mechanisms. Chu Luiwei originally wanted to ask Sun Yi to build a second layer of defense in addition to the normal defenses. He didn't expect that after just one morning he would say that the situation was a little special. Chu Luiwei knew Sun Yi's personality best. If he said that, then he must have really encountered some kind of trouble. I'll go with you. The two of them had just walked out of the Yu residence when they bumped into two people. The person in front was wearing a colorful dress. Her body was slim and exquisite, and her slender and fair wrists were jingling with jade fragments. It was little Hachi. Master! Seeing Chu Luiwei, little Hachi's eyes lit up, and she immediately went up to him. Master, little Hachi missed you so much. Her voice was soft and charming, and her beautiful eyes blinked lightly. They were so lively that they seemed to be able to drip water. If it wasn't for her big brother standing beside her, she would have clung to Chu Luiwei directly. Chu Luiwei's mouth twitched. They had clearly not seen each other for 2 or 3 days. Those who didn't know better would think that they had been separated for 800 years. Besides, the reason why they didn't meet was because little Hachi had been busy catching up on sleep and taking care of herself. Some time ago, little Hachi and Shifang had been handling those medicinal herbs day and night in various parts of Peach Blossom Cove. They almost didn't sleep at all, and it was very tiring. Although this wasn't considered much for ordinary cultivators, it was different for little Hachi. She had always been delicate and valued her appearance. She would break down if she slept until there was a mark on her face, let alone staying up in the wind and sun every day. He heard that she had been fiddling with a lot of things to apply to her face and take a bath. You're finally willing to come out today? Chu Luiwei teased. Little Hachi pursed her red lips. It's all because I've been through too much trouble recently. I've become haggard. Master, take a look. How do I look? Chu Luiwei scrutinized her small face and nodded affirmatively. Her beauty is unparalleled. Little Hachi was satisfied. Seeing that she was happy, Chu Luiwei looked at the young man who came with her. She had noticed this person just now. His appearance was ordinary and his figure was thin, but somehow he was somewhat familiar. Little Hachi smiled and winked. Could it be that Master couldn't recognize him? Chu Luiwei looked at it carefully again. Lin Qifei. The young man suddenly raised his hand and took off a thin mask from his face. A familiar face appeared in front of Chu Luiwei. Her eyebrows were bright and clear, indifferent and cold. Her clear and shallow eyes were suffused with a faint light. It was Lin Qifei. Greetings, Princess. Lin Qifei stepped forward and saluted with a fist salute. It's really you? Chu Luiwei couldn't help but laugh. No wonder she found him familiar. Why are you here? Of course I brought you in. Before Lin Qifei could explain, little Hachi spoke first with a smile. Originally, I thought that after staying in the house for a few days, I would come out for a walk to get some fresh air. I heard that someone was outside the city gate, so I went to take a look. It was an acquaintance, so I brought you here. At this time, almost no one came to Peach Blossom Cove. Therefore, when someone suddenly came alone, the people in charge of guarding the city gate were naturally very vigilant. Lin Qifei didn't hide his identity, but the city gate was heavily guarded, so naturally, they had to check carefully. In the end, little Hachi happened to go over and helped Lin Qifei out by bringing him here. Speaking of which, Lin Qifei and she were not familiar with each other. But she knew that Lin Qifei was working for Chu Luiwei, so naturally, she treated him as one of her own. As for that face, Little 8 had relied purely on the aura on his body to identify him. She had always been good at this, so recognizing a person was nothing to her. Lin Qifei bowed. I heard that Princess had won a great victory in Peach Blossom Cove, So I came specially. What happened a while ago had already spread throughout the entire world of God. Of course, Lin Qifei had also heard about it. Chu Liyue's smile deepened. I originally said that I would let you come over after everything was settled here. I didn't expect you to act so quickly. In fact, Chu Liyue had her own considerations. Lin Qifei's identity was somewhat special. The Lin family was one of the 28 branches of the Yuntian Tower. Logically speaking, Lin Qifei was a member of the Yuntian Tower. Although he had started to follow Chu Liyue before, at that time, Chu Liyue was still the princess of the Yuntian Tower. But now, it was different. In addition to her identity as the princess, Chu Liyue was also the lord of Peach Blossom Cove. His coming to Peach Blossom Cove meant that he had completely defected to Chu Liyue. Although Chu Liyue and Rong Xiu were already husband and wife, Peach Blossom Cove and the Yuntian Tower were ultimately independent of each other. Lin Qifei's actions? Clearly, he had already made his decision. Chu Liyue paused for a moment and waved his hand. You came at the right time. Come with me to the Gate Realm to take a look. He was also extremely talented in this area. Perhaps he could really come in handy. Lin Qifei acknowledged respectfully. Chu Liyue then looked at Little Hachi. Little Hachi, do you want to come with us? Little Hachi wanted to refuse, but on second thought, there was nothing to do when she went back. She had gone through so much trouble to recover her complexion and had even put on exquisite makeup. How could she go back just like that? That would be such a waste. Therefore, after much consideration, Little Hachi decided to go. When she smiled, her eyes were charming, but the temperament between her eyebrows revealed a hint of innocence. When the two different kinds of beauty were mixed together, it was especially captivating. She was indeed a natural beauty. She walked leisurely to Lin Qifei's side. After all, I was the one who brought Mr. Lin in. Naturally, it's best to accompany him. Occasionally, when she was in a good mood, she liked to make such jokes and tease people. Chu Liyue knew her best. He did not mind and nodded. Yanqing? When did you come back? Digression 6.0 Clocked mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1983. Chu Liyue looked at Yanqing, who was walking out from the corner of the street. According to Rong Xiu, Yanqing went to send the people from Yuntian Tower out of the city today. Some time ago, Rong Xiu secretly sent many people from Yuntian Tower over because he expected that the Nan family would make a move. Now that everything was settled, there was no point for them to stay here. Rong Xiu sent them back, leaving only a small number of them. She didn't expect to meet him so coincidentally. Yanqing walked over. Little Hachi's back was to him. When she heard his name, she couldn't help but freeze. Although she didn't look back, she could still hear the footsteps approaching. She clenched her fists subconsciously. Greetings, Your Highness. Yanqing stood still and bowed respectfully. He was standing not far away from Little Hachi and Lin Qifei. Little Eight glanced out of the corner of his eye and saw the tall and straight figure dressed in black martial arts attire. She didn't know why, but she was very nervous. I just sent the last group of people out, Yanqing said. Chu Liyue nodded. Yanqing had always been a straightforward person. What is Your Highness? Yanqing saw that they seemed to have some plans. He thought for a while and asked. Chu Liyue's lips curved up slightly. Nothing. There's something going on in the Gate Realm. I want to see it for myself. I'll be back soon. You can continue with your work. Yanqing responded. Then he looked at Little Hachi and Lin Qifei, who were standing at the side. Little Hachi could even feel his gaze, which was almost tangible, sweeping over her body. Her entire body tensed up. For a moment, she didn't dare to look up and meet Yanqing's eyes. However, Yanqing's gaze didn't stop at all. It was like flowing water. So it's young Master Lin. Yanqing gently nodded in acknowledgement. Lin Qifei also returned the gesture politely. Greetings, Madame Yanqing. Yanqing naturally knew that Lin Qifei was Chu Liyue's man. After greeting him, she didn't ask any more questions and turned to leave. It wasn't until his figure disappeared through the main doors of the Yu residence that Chu Liyue suddenly thought of something. He turned his head to look strangely. Just now, it seemed that Yen Qing didn't greet little Hachi? That wasn't it either. He simply nodded at Sun Yi. Furthermore, it seemed like little Hachi didn't want to talk to him, so he didn't say anything else. The two of them already had a conflict, and they might even be fighting, Chu Luiyue thought to himself. Yen Qing was not a stingy person. He looked very magnanimous and upright. On the other hand, little Hachi seemed a little awkward after coming over from Yen Qing. The reason why Yen Qing didn't take the initiative to greet her was probably because he was worried that it would make little Hachi even more unhappy. Although he was a man of few words and had a cold personality, he had always been very smart. Otherwise, Rong Xiu wouldn't have placed him in such an important position. Chu Luiyue rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache coming on. In the end, he decided to throw this matter to the back of his mind. He didn't care about them anymore. Although little Hachi was occasionally a little spoiled and willful, she always knew her limits. Even if she had some conflict with Yen Qing, according to Yen Qing's ice-cold personality, after dealing with it for a while, little Hachi would probably feel that it was meaningless and leave it unsettled. Let's go and take a look at the door world. Chu Luiyue walked forward. Sun Yi and Lin Qifei followed closely behind. Little Hachi, on the other hand, stood where she was, seemingly in a daze. No one knew what she was thinking. After Chu Luiyue walked some distance, he realized that she wasn't following him. He turned around and called out to her. Little Hachi? Little Hachi came back to her senses. HM? Oh, I'm coming. As she spoke, she quickly walked over. But this time, she didn't stand by Lin Qifei's side. Instead, she obediently followed behind Sun Yi. Chu Luiyue looked at her thoughtfully. After a while, he put away his thoughts and turned to walk in the direction of the door world. On the other side, Yen Qing returned to the Yu residence. His footsteps were calm, and his handsome and cold face was expressionless as usual. Only his eyes seemed to have a slight ripple in them. Yen Qing? Yen Qing. A familiar voice rang out. Yen Qing raised his head. Umo had appeared in front of him without him noticing. At this moment, he was looking at him with a puzzled expression and waving his hand in front of his eyes. What are you thinking about? You're so engrossed. Umo had come with the soldiers of Yuntian Tower a few days ago. However, he had always kept a low profile and didn't appear in front of others. Even in the Yu residence, many people didn't know of Umo's existence. Most of the time, he was only responsible for reporting the news outside to his master and then passing down the orders. Because some of these things were rather secretive, he had also deliberately reduced his presence. However, this was the inner courtyard, and this was Yen Qing's residence. Normal people wouldn't come here. That was why Umo came out directly. Yen Qing took a step and went around him. Nothing. His personality had always been cold. He might not even answer 3 questions. Umo was already used to it. However, his state was really a little strange. The two of them had been colleagues for many years and knew each other very well. Umo was sure that something must have happened to Yen Qing. He quickly followed him. Didn't you go to send someone off today? Could it be that something is not going well? Yen Qing looked at him indifferently and didn't say anything. However, his meaning was very obvious. Umo scratched his head. He also felt that this guess was too ridiculous. Those who went to send off were Yuntian Tower's own people. Yen Qing's status was noble, so those people didn't dare to act rashly. Then, there didn't seem to be any other reason. Ever since the princess consort won the battle with Yi Wentao, the atmosphere in Peach Blossom Dock became very lively and cheerful. The unity of the people in the city and their belief in her was beyond imagination. Everything in Peach Blossom Dock was developing in a better direction without them interfering. The princess consort was in a good mood, so was His Highness. He was even more amiable to them. What was there to worry about on such a good day? Yen Qing walked to the stone bench in the courtyard and sat down. His eyes were slightly lowered as if he was thinking about something. Umo followed him and poured himself a cup of tea. We're all brothers. If you have any difficulties, just tell me. There's no need to be polite between us. This sentence seemed to have convinced Yen Qing. His heart moved slightly, and he looked up at Umo. Umo was drinking tea. The fragrance of the tea was rich and refreshing. Yan Qing was Rong Xiu's confidant and was treated very well in the Yu residence. Sanson specially ordered people to send him many good things. Yuemo was sighing with emotion when he heard Yan Qing suddenly say, "Do you think young Master Lin is good-looking?" Yuemo spat out the tea in his mouth. In an instant, the tea stains splashed all over his body. However, he couldn't care less at this time. He widened his eyes and looked at Yan Qing in horror. "What did you say?" Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1984. Yan Qing seemed to be deep in thought. I heard that fourth young Master Lin was liked by many girls at Heavenly Cave Cliff. However, his marriage was delayed because of his weak body. Although these matters were fragmented, the information that Yan Qing had in his hands was far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to stay by Rong Xiu's side for so long and deal with everything neatly. Yuemo spat out the tea leaves in his mouth with difficulty. You said Lin Qifei?" Fourth young Master Lin of Heavenly Cave Cliff was Lin Qifei. But the was. Why did Yan Qing suddenly mention him and ask if he was good-looking? Yuemo looked at him as if he had seen a ghost. "What does it have to do with you whether he's good-looking or not?" "No, Yan Qing, are you okay?" This wasn't the Yan Qing he knew at all. This guy usually didn't even care if a woman was good-looking or not, but now he was asking a man. Yuemo's eyes gradually turned from shock and confusion to horror. Wait. You can't be." He suddenly thought of something and threw the teacup in his hand away. He covered his chest with his hands and was nervous and on the verge of breaking down. Damn it. Could it be that Yan Qing has always liked men? We used to live and eat together for many years. Yuemo felt like he was going crazy at the thought of this. Yan Qing frowned, and the disdain on his face was overwhelming. "Even if I really like men, you're not worthy of it." Yuemo was speechless. So, he misunderstood? But why did this sound so awkward? Seeing Yan Qing's eyes, Yuemo realized what he was doing and felt embarrassed. Ahem. It's a misunderstanding. He let go of his hand and touched his nose awkwardly. "I'm doing this out of concern for my brother." Yan Qing frowned even harder, and a rare look of annoyance flashed in his eyes. He must be confused to ask Yuemo this question. Who knew how far that brain of his could go? Thinking of this, he felt inexplicably frustrated, so he stood up and left. Why are you leaving?" He hadn't finished speaking yet. Seeing that Yan Qing was about to leave, he hurriedly followed her, but he didn't dare to get too close. "I'm sorry, okay? Tell me about it." Bang! Yan Qing walked into the room and closed the door, cutting off the noise. Hiss! Yuemo sucked in a breath of cold air and covered his nose. So painful. This brat really didn't hold back. Moreover, why was he so irritable today? Who provoked him? Yuemo felt wronged, but he wasn't angry. There was something wrong with Yan Qing's behavior. Perhaps, should he investigate from other aspects? Chu Luiwei and the others were extremely fast. After about an hour, they arrived at the gate of the Peach Blossom Cove. From afar, a huge curtain of light fell from the sky. A powerful and vast pressure faintly spread from it. This was the gate, and also the existence that connected the outside world of the divine ruins. When the guards of the Yu residents who had been guarding here saw Chu Luiwei and the others arrive, they all bowed. "Greetings, Master Yu." Chu Luiwei nodded, indicating that they didn't need to be so polite. These people were all personally selected by Sanson, and they were all trustworthy. She sized up the gate for a while, but didn't find anything unusual. "Sin-Yi, you said that the situation here is special? What's going on?" Sin-Yi walked forward for a distance, and was only a step away from the gate. It was within reach. "Master, come over and take a look." Chu Luiwei walked over with doubts in her heart. It wasn't until she stood in this position that she finally saw what was wrong with the gate. The power fluctuations of this gate didn't seem normal. Chu Luiwei stretched out her hand. Just as her slender fingers touched the faintly shining curtain of light, ripples spread out. A dangerous aura suddenly swept out from the curtain of light. Chu Liyue's heart trembled, and a reddish-gold flame quickly surged out. But in the next moment, that ball of flame seemed to be pulled into the curtain of light by an invisible hand. Boom! Sparks flew everywhere. "Master, be careful." Sun Yi seemed to have expected this, and he directly took action, setting up a green barrier in front of Chu Liyue. Fine sparks splashed onto the barrier, producing ear-piercing sizzling sounds before they were quickly extinguished. And at this moment, that ball of flame had completely disappeared. Only the ripples were left on the curtain of light. Chu Liyue held her breath. At this moment, she realized that these ripples had gathered together to form a whirlpool. This whirlpool was extremely shallow, and it was almost impossible to see it from the front. If it hadn't swallowed that ball of flame just now, Chu Liyue wouldn't have noticed it either. Soon, the whirlpool gradually calmed down, and it returned to its original calm state. It was as if everything just now was just an illusion. Chu Liyue frowned. This gate realm was indeed different from ordinary gate realms. Inside, it contained an extremely dangerous power. Chu Liyue didn't doubt that if someone passed by now, their ending would be exactly the same as that ball of flame that had been swallowed. At that time, it would be hard to say whether they would live or die. Such a gate realm was extremely dangerous, and it couldn't function normally at all. No wonder Sun Yi insisted on inviting her over to take a look personally. This gate realm, when did it become like this? Chu Liyue turned around and looked at the few people in charge of guarding it. The person in front hurriedly said, "In reply to Master Yu, this situation didn't happen suddenly. Ever since the people of Black Sword sect were all killed, we came here to replace them." On the first day, this gate realm was still fine, but as time passed, it gradually changed. Until yesterday, it was completely impossible to enter or leave. Originally, we wanted to report it today, but Lord Sun Yi happened to be here, so they couldn't be blamed for not discovering it in time. During this period of time, the entire Peach Blossom Dock was under martial law, and no one was allowed to enter or leave as they pleased. The gate realm was also completely sealed off. They were only in charge of guarding it, and this change happened silently. There were almost no flaws on the surface, so it was normal that they only found out now. Chu Liyue looked at Sun Yi. "What do you think?" Sun Yi paused for a moment. "I guess that perhaps this is caused by an external force." It was just a few words, but they contained a lot of information. Because this wasn't an ordinary barrier, but a gate realm. This light screen was naturally formed and had existed for 10,000 years. Who could have such a powerful force to affect it to such an extent? Suddenly, a voice sounded. "There's a Xian formation hidden in this gate realm." Chu Liyue turned and saw that Lin Qifei had also walked over at some point. He was standing in front of the gate realm and staring at it. Her heart skipped a beat. "Why do you say that?" Digression. The 5th update is at 6:30 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1985. Lin Qifei pursed his lips. "I have a feeling." He couldn't produce any evidence yet, but he just had this feeling. It was subtle but also very clear. Chu Liyue followed his gaze. At this moment, the ripples on the door realm had completely calmed down. Seeing that Chu Liyue didn't say anything, Lin Qifei thought she didn't believe him and continued. "I've entered the door realm many times, so I have some understanding of it. This door realm is indeed different from ordinary door realms, and this difference is very likely caused by Xian formations. You've broken through to the great Xian realm?" Chu Liyue suddenly asked. Lin Qifei was startled, and a hint of surprise flashed through his eyes. Seeing his reaction, Chu Liyue immediately confirmed her guess. As expected, when did this happen? Everyone turned to look at them. Lin Qifei was only in his early 20s and looked very young. In addition, he had been ill for many years, and his body was weak and thin, making him look like a frail scholar. Now, Chu Liyue actually said he was a great Xian realm master. How could this not shock everyone? Even Sun Yi was a little surprised, and he stared at Lin Qifei. Although he knew that Lin Qifei was very talented in this area, he didn't expect him to break through again in such a short time. 10 days ago, Lin Qifei said honestly. Actually, at that time, he had already heard some news about Peach Blossom Dock and wanted to come directly, but he happened to be on the verge of a breakthrough, so he delayed it for a while. Although he knew that this side didn't lack his combat strength, he still had the intention. Chu Luiyue exhaled softly, looking at Lin Qifei with undisguised admiration. She had long known that Lin Qifei was shockingly talented in this area, and he wasn't inferior to her at all. Lin Qifei could recognize this largely because he knew more about the Door realm than Chu Luiyue. But at the same time, his terrifyingly sharp senses were of great help. You said that there is a Xian formation inside, then? Can you find out what kind of Xian formation it is? Lin Qifei shook his head. I can't tell for now. He could feel the existence of a profound formation, but he was unable to make a more detailed judgment based on this feeling alone. This was within Chu Luiyue's expectations, so she wasn't disappointed and just nodded. It's okay. Since they had already found some clues, there was definitely still hope. She looked at the gate realm in front of her again and narrowed her eyes. Xian formation. Naturally, such a thing wouldn't appear in the gate realm out of nowhere. Who could it be? Family. The news of Yi Wentao's return spread like wildfire. However, no one was able to see him. This was because Yi Wentao had returned to his residence as soon as he returned. He only told the others that he needed to rest for a period of time. During this time, he would not meet with anyone. Actually, this was easy to understand. Everyone in the family Yi had seen how badly he had been injured that day. Moreover, after this battle, his face could be considered to have been completely lost. He could no longer raise his head in front of the family Yi. It was not hard to imagine that facing anyone in the family Yi at this time would be a great torture for him. Of course, Yi Wentao's residence had been changed. After all, he was no longer the family head. Jun Jiuqing had specially arranged for an extremely remote corner for him. To Yi Wentao, this was humiliating but also the best choice. Because this way, he could really avoid meeting the family Yi, and he wouldn't have to care about the various gazes. Jun Jiuqing only asked the two elders who had returned with him to guard him. No one in the family Yi had expected that Yi Wentao, who had been in high spirits not long ago, would return to the family Yi in such a situation. Dusk fell, and the moon was in the middle of the sky. Yi Wentao lay alone on the bed. The bitter smell of medicine filled the room. On the table next to him was a wooden box. A pill lay quietly in it. The medicinal fragrance was emitted from it. Jun Jiuqing had specially left it for him to heal his injuries. But after Yi Wentao returned, he lay in bed from day to night without taking the pill. He opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling. He seemed to be looking at the patterns on the ceiling, but also seemed to be lost in thought, looking through them to see something else. Family head. Suddenly, a series of familiar footsteps came from outside the door, followed by the elder's respectful salute. Yi Wentao did not move. Naturally, he was not addressed as family head. I'll go in and take a look. Jun Jiuqing's voice was cold and indifferent. You can leave first. The two elders took turns to be on duty, so there was only one person outside the door. His words were not to be questioned. The elder quickly replied, Yes. Soon, Jun Jiuqing pushed the door open and entered. Yi Wentao closed his eyes. Jun Jiuqing glanced at him, turned around, locked the door, and set up a barrier to ensure that their voices would not be heard. Only then did he speak. Have you thought it through? Yi Wentao did not speak. Obviously, he did not want to pay attention to him. Jun Jiuqing was not in a hurry. He walked to the side of the bed not far away. He tilted his head and carefully looked at Yi Wentao for a while. Suddenly, he curved his lips without a smile. It seems that you are quite confident in yourself, and think that you can fight back? Family head, I have always respected you, but I did not expect that you would still be so naive. He gently knocked on the table. You know the origin of that shield, right? Or, should I ask, when did you come into contact with that person from Black Demon Cave? Yi Wentao suddenly opened his eyes. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1986. Yi Wentao's eyes were filled with shock. He wanted to deny it, but when he looked up, he met Jun Jiuqing's gaze that was full of scrutiny, as if he had seen through everything. This made Yi Wentao's heart slowly turn cold. I really underestimated you. To be able to ask such a question, it was enough to show that Jun Jiuqing knew much more than he thought. He didn't see it at all before this. If he had known, he would have been on guard against him. Patriarch, you flatter me. I was just casually guessing. As for the truth, it's better for you to tell me personally. As Jun Jiuqing spoke, he directly sat down beside him. It seemed that if Yi Wentao didn't give him a satisfactory answer today, he wouldn't leave. Patriarch, you've done your best for family Yi for so many years, but in the end, you've fallen into such a situation. Even I feel sorry for you. Jun Jiuqing's words were like sharp blades, ruthlessly stabbing into Yi Wentao's heart. Just tell me what you want, and I'll get it for you. What do you think? Yi Wentao sneered in his heart. That was a nice way to put it. Jun Jiuqing was just doing it for himself. The room fell into a dead silence. Yi Wentao didn't say a word, and Jun Jiuqing didn't say anything either. The two of them faced each other silently. In the dark night, this kind of silence was almost suffocating. After an unknown period of time, Yi Wentao finally closed his eyes. She's holding the armillary shield. Jun Jiuqing looked up, and there seemed to be a glimmer in his eyes. Armillary shield? He had heard of all the famous divine weapons in the divine ruins, but he had never heard of this before. However, if it could make Yi Wentao go to such lengths, it must be an extremely precious item. According to Chu Luiyue, Yi Wentao seemed to be doing it for Peach Blossom Cove, but in reality he was after the armillary shield. If that's the case, then what kind of existence was this armillary shield? How could it attract Yi Wentao more than the Peach Blossom Dock? I wonder what kind of treasure the armillary heaven's shield is for the patriarch to yearn for it so much? Jun Jiuqing asked. Yi Wentao suddenly laughed and turned to look at Jun Jiuqing. His scarlet eyes flickered with a bloodthirsty glimmer in the dark night, making people shudder. Then his low and hoarse voice rang out in the room. I don't know about the rest, but once I have the armillary heaven shield, I have a high chance of becoming a god. His voice was very low, as if it would disappear in the wind at any moment. However, Jun Jiuqing heard it clearly. His brows furrowed. There were beings of a higher level than Her Eminence. However, in the Divine Ruins world, it had already been 10,000 years since anyone had broken through the shackle. All the cultivators were trapped in the Her Eminence realm. No matter how hard they cultivated, they could not advance to the next level. But now, Yi Wentao actually said, with the armillary heaven shield, he could become a god? No wonder he cared so much. There were millions of cultivators in the world. Who didn't want to become stronger? It was even more so for a top god like Yi Wentao. He had seen too many things in the secular world, and he didn't care at all. The only thing that could make him crazy was this. If this news was known to others, it would probably cause a huge storm. But who could be sure about this kind of thing? Could he just rely on a shield to cut the rope that had bound him for 10,000 years? Jun Jiuqing remained doubtful. But he didn't completely deny this possibility. There was no smoke without fire. Yi Wentao was willing to make such a big move, which proved that he had a certain basis. Otherwise, according to his cautious personality, he wouldn't act so rashly. Yi Wentao looked at Jun Jiuqing's changing expression and laughed softly. You say, who wouldn't want such a thing? Nan Yifan doesn't know about this. Jun Jiuqing interrupted him and said lightly. This was not a question, but a statement of certainty. Yi Wentao wasn't surprised that he could guess. After all, the series of events in the Nan family during this period was enough to explain everything. If Nan Yifan knew this, he wouldn't have taken such a risk. Then, the news about the armillary heaven shield. Did the patriarch hear it from the Black Demon Cave? Jun Jiuqing suddenly thought of something. He raised his eyes and stared at him. Yi Wentao took a deep breath. That's right. That's strange. How could the one in the Black Demon Cave be willing to tell the patriarch of the Black Demon Cave such important information? He seems to need this more, right? Jun Jiuqing asked with interest. You know a lot. Yi Wentao looked at him meaningfully, but he wasn't shocked. Ever since Jun Jiuqing asked that question, he knew that Jun Jiuqing knew a lot. Of course, I didn't get this news for free. I got it in exchange. Jun Jiuqing narrowed his eyes. The patriarch is so capable to get such news. I wonder, what did you exchange for it? Yi Wentao sneered. How do you think he escaped from Rongxiu a few years ago? Peach Blossom Dock Mansion. There were a few peach trees in the courtyard. Under the peach trees, there was a green rattan chair. At this moment, a person was half lying on it. A breeze blew, and the pink and white peach blossoms fell, making the person's clothes look whiter than snow. His eyes were closed, and his facial features were clear and handsome. He was perfect. From afar, he looked as if the heavens had used the best jade to carve him. He didn't look like a human being. When Umo walked in, he saw such a scene. He had been with Rongxiu for many years, and he was already used to His Highness's peerless appearance. But when he looked at him again, a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. If Yan Qing was really gay, then he should like His Highness, right? Is there a man in this world who is more good-looking than His Highness? No, His Highness can no longer be described as good-looking. He's simply, just as Umo was letting his imagination run wild, Rongxiu opened his eyes. He looked over and happened to see Umo staring at him with a thoughtful expression, and the look in his eyes was even more. Rongxiu narrowed his eyes. Umo suddenly felt a chill. He finally came back to his senses and looked over. He met His Highness's eyes. He immediately shuddered. This so cold. His Highness's eyes are so scary. He originally wanted to run away, but his strong desire to live ultimately urged Umo forward. Your Highness, the matter you asked me to investigate has been found. Rongxiu sat up. Speak. Umo's expression was solemn as he bowed. Your guess is correct. A few years ago, there were indeed a portion of those who fought against you who were not from the Black Demon Cave. He paused for a moment, then continued. 3 of them were from Family E. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1987. These men are Yi Wentao's men of sacrifice, and they only obey him. Even many people in the family E don't know about their existence. Therefore, most people in the family E don't know about what happened back then. 3 men. Although it didn't sound like a lot, they were all very powerful. Otherwise, Rongxiu wouldn't have specially sent him to investigate this matter. In the years since then, Yi Wentao has been very cautious and hasn't summoned any of his men of sacrifice. That's why we haven't been able to find out that Family E is behind this. Until this time, when Yi Wentao was seriously injured and Jun Jiuqing took over the position of family head, he finally made a move. We followed the vine to the melon and found out about this. Although Umo was usually lively and liked to joke, he was very reliable when it came to serious matters. Rongxiu had handed this matter to him a few years ago. In between he had tried countless methods, but to no avail. However, he didn't give up. When he found out that Family E had come to Peach Blossom Dock, he quickly sent more men to continue the investigation. Now, there was finally a result. Rongxiu nodded. His thin lips curled slightly, but there was no surprise in his eyes. He had indeed guessed this possibility long ago. At that time, he had chosen to go to Black Demon Cave only after he had a precise understanding of their strength. However, when he arrived, he found that the actual situation was somewhat different from what he had expected. Although it didn't have much of an impact on the final result, but Rongxiu had put this matter on his tab. In the world of divine ruins, there are very few people who have this ability. It wasn't hard to guess, but the key was to find evidence. Rongxiu smiled faintly. There seemed to be a thin layer of coldness between his brows. Yi Wentao was also a strong-willed man. Ever since then, he hadn't had the slightest contact with his men of sacrifice for such a long time. He had even cut off all contact with those who weren't sent to Black Demon Cave. It wasn't easy to nurture these people. The fact that he was willing to spend so much on them showed how tempting it was. Yi Wentao knew that Rongxiu would inevitably suspect him, so he had been very careful with his words and actions. If it wasn't for the fact that he was forced into a corner and had no other choice, he probably wouldn't have used this trump card. It seems that his life and family isn't too good. As Rong Xiu spoke, he suddenly recalled how Chu Luiwei raised his eyebrows and smiled. He couldn't help but smile. Speaking of which, I still have to thank you, for this matter. If she hadn't given Yi Wentao a few fierce medicine in succession and completely stunned him, things wouldn't have progressed so smoothly. Then, what do you mean? Let's just wait and see. Rong Xiu lay back on the rattan chair and waved his hand casually, as if he did not care about these things at all. Yuemo was a little surprised. After all, this investigation had been going on for several years. He thought that His Highness would definitely counterattack after getting the evidence. Let Family E deal with it themselves. Rong Xiu said lightly. Jun Jiuqing and Yi Wentao, there was still a fight. Yumo's eyes lit up. He immediately understood something. Your Highness is wise. Seeing that Rong Xiu seemed to be planning to rest, Yuemo wanted to take his leave. However, he suddenly recalled Yan Qing's strange behavior and hesitated. Just say what you want to say. Rong Xiu saw through his thoughts. Yuemo scratched his head in embarrassment. Your Highness, it's actually nothing. It's just that I feel that Yan Qing has been acting a little strange recently. Did he suffer a blow during this period? Rong Xiu's lips curved up into a light smile. Don't worry. That's what he deserves, Yi Zichen said. Digression, I'll be back at 6. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1988. As soon as he finished speaking, a familiar sound of footsteps came from outside. Rong Xiu's eyebrows moved slightly, and an exquisite and slender figure came into view. It was Chu Luiwei. Yuemo turned around and bowed. Greetings, Your Highness. Chu Luiwei had her head slightly lowered, as if thinking about something, but when she heard the voice, she looked up. Rong Xiu had already gotten up and walked over. What are you thinking about? Why are you so lost in thought? As he spoke, he glanced at her hand and saw a faint red mark, as if something had pressed down hard on it. There was a trace of dark red blood that was about to seep out. He frowned slightly. What's wrong? Chu Luiwei came back to her senses and shook her head. It's nothing. It's just a small injury. To her, it was not even an injury. Rong Xiu put his fingers on her wrist and checked it. After confirming that she had indeed only suffered a small flesh injury and was not seriously injured, his expression eased a little. But in the end, his heart still ached. He pulled Chu Luiwei to the rattan chair and let her sit down. He took out the medicine, gently applied it on her hand, and carefully massaged it. The faint smell of medicine was mixed with a trace of peach blossom fragrance. A cold feeling came from her hand, and the burning pain from before was instantly reduced by a lot. Chu Luiwei did not care about these injuries at first, but when she saw Rong Xiu slightly lowering his head to apply medicine for her, she felt very relieved. She originally wanted to do it herself, but after thinking about it, she let Rong Xiu do it. Your Highness, Your Highness, Your Highness, I will take my leave first. Yuemo was already used to this kind of scene. Rong Xiu responded and let him go. Soon, only the two of them were left in the courtyard. Chu Luiwei tilted her head slightly and stared at Rong Xiu for a while. His expression was very serious, and his movements were very gentle. In the Divine Ruins world, Rong Xiu's name was illustrious. Many people trembled with fear and reverence when they heard his name. Even Nan Yifan and Yi Wentao did not dare to offend him. However, such a person was by her side now. Just because her hand was injured, he patiently and meticulously applied medicine for her. It seemed like there was nothing more important than this in the world. There seemed to be waves surging in her heart. Finally, she couldn't help but stand up and kiss him lightly on the cheek. My husband is the best. Like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, he quickly retreated. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. Don't think that you won't be able to explain yourself just because of this. Ever since Chu Luiwei had broken through to the divine body level, she had rarely been injured. It was obviously not normal to leave such a mark on her hand. Moreover, they were in Peach Blossom Dock, her own territory. Chu Luiwei exhaled and lay back in the recliner. It's all because of that gate realm. Rong Xiu paused. Very troublesome? Actually, he had already guessed that it had something to do with the gate realm in Peach Blossom Dock. He knew that Chu Luiyue, Sun Yi, and the others had gone to the gate realm together. However, he didn't expect her to be injured. Chu Luiyue nodded. I don't know who hit a Xian formation in the gate realm. Moreover, that Xian formation is extremely powerful. It has already affected the entire gate realm. Now, it's impossible to enter and exit the gate realm normally. She shrugged. She was both angry and amused. There's no need to send someone to guard it. Even a high god expert might not be able to escape safely. As she spoke, she raised her hand. Yes, this hand is injured because of this. After hearing Lin Qifei's guess, she felt that it made sense. In order to figure out what was going on, she decided to try it herself. However, just as her hand reached into the gate realm, an extremely powerful force seemed to surge from the surroundings. She had a bad feeling and immediately withdrew her hand without hesitation. Even so, she was still injured. Fortunately, I dodged quickly. Otherwise, Rong Xiu's brows furrowed slightly. After all, although Chu Luiyue was only a high god, she had already tempered her divine body through the god-destroying tribulation. With her current divine body, she could even fight against a venerable god. Wasn't Yi Wentao the best example? It seemed that the gate realm had indeed become extremely dangerous. Rong Xiu pondered for a moment. I'll go with you tomorrow. Chu Luiyue nodded. A few petals drifted down. Chu Luiyue looked up. The peach blossoms on the tree were in full bloom. Suddenly, something landed between her brows. It was cold. Chu Luiyue was stunned. It's snowing? Rong Xiu looked up at the sky as well. The originally azure sky had unknowingly turned into a dark, leaden gray. Sparkling and translucent snowflakes were slowly drifting down. He retracted his gaze and bent down to pick her up. The snow in Peach Blossom Cove came very suddenly. However, for the people who had stayed in Peach Blossom Cove for a long time, this was not a surprise. For many years, the weather in Peach Blossom Cove had been very changeable. Most people were already used to it. In the corridor in front of the door, Sanson was leisurely walking forward with his hands in his hands. As he walked, he was humming a little tune. His small eyes narrowed with a smile, as if he was in a good mood. Yu Jiao and Shi Fang happened to bump into him. From afar, they saw Sanson's happy expression. Yu Jiao and Shi Fang greeted him. Third brother, what happened? Why are you so happy? Sanson said with a smile. Nothing, nothing. Yu Jiao and Shi Fang looked at each other. There was only one explanation for him to be so happy. Looks like third brother made a fortune again? Yu Jiao teased. Sanson put his hands in his hands and smiled brightly. What? Wasn't it all thanks to Master? I was just about to report the good news to Master. Shi Fang suddenly thought of something. Looks like someone has already started to contact third brother? Sanson raised his finger and blinked. Shu, this matter isn't completely settled yet. It's not too late to be happy after Master makes the decision. Although he said that, the smile on his face was already overflowing. After saying that, he hurriedly bid farewell to the two of them and headed inside. Yu Jiao held her sword with both hands and looked back and forth between Sanson and Shi Fang. Shi Fang, you seem to know something? Shi Fang didn't care much. Actually, it's not a big deal. It's just that third brother plans to open his business outside. Yu Jiao immediately understood. So he wanted to expand his business. If he did this, it meant that there would be greater profits. No wonder he was so happy. It's normal for third brother to do this. But, open it outside? Where are you referring to? Shi Fang looked at him suspiciously. How would I know? Yu Jiao, I knew that I couldn't be referring to him. When Sanson arrived at the inner courtyard, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu were sitting under the eaves and admiring the snow. Master, Your Highness. Sanson tried his best to control the expression on his face before stepping forward. Chu Luiyue turned to look at him and raised his eyebrows. It seems that a lot of people have contacted you recently? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1989. The smile on Sanson's face immediately widened. Master is really wise. You guessed right. Ever since I spread the news 3 days ago that I intend to sell the herbs and elixirs of the Peach Blossom Cove, I have received news from many aristocratic families. Look, I have already compiled a list of names. Take a look. As he spoke, he presented a piece of paper with both hands. Chu Luiyue took it. On the paper, there was a list of names. Most of them were famous aristocratic families in the world of God. Chu Luiyue was quite familiar with some of them. Sanson rubbed his hands, unable to hide his excitement and eagerness. Master, ever since you defeated Yi Wentao, the Yu residence of the Peach Blossom Cove has become famous. Now, there are many people in the world of God who want to build a good relationship with us. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were trying to curry favor. Everyone in the world of God knew what kind of treasure the Peach Blossom Cove was. Now that this place belonged to Chu Luiyue, they could only settle for the second best. Even if they could not occupy the Peach Blossom Cove, it would be the same if they could obtain the resources of the Peach Blossom Cove. The Peach Blossom Cove was rich with energy from heaven and earth, and there were all kinds of heavenly treasures growing there. Many of them were extremely difficult to find in the entire world of God. Although Sanson had only opened a few shops in the Peach Blossom Cove before, he was actually very famous. Occasionally, there would be some people who came here to buy all kinds of precious herbs and elixirs from him. Ever since Sanson sent out the news, many aristocratic families had expressed their goodwill. On one hand, the things in the Peach Blossom Cove were indeed of high quality. On the other hand, this could be considered as building a relationship with Chu Luiyue. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone, why not? Sanson could almost imagine the scene. Anyway, the Peach Blossom Cove had an almost inexhaustible supply of heavenly treasures in his small space. Hence, it would not affect anything if he took out some of them. Others did not know, but he and his master were very clear about this. In the past, because he was oppressed by the people of the Black Sword sect, he had always been very careful. Now, he could finally let go. Master, take a look at this list. Is there anything you want to change? Chu Luiyue looked up and down a few times. Meteor sect, and these sects. As she spoke, she pointed from above. Sanson leaned over to take a look and quickly memorized it. Apart from these 4, the rest have all been rejected. Chu Luiyue said indifferently. Sanson was waiting happily, but when she heard this, she was stunned. You only chose 4? Reject the rest? There were more than 10 clans listed here. Master hadn't even reached a third of it. Chu Luiyue nodded and handed the paper over. Sanson was very puzzled and stared at the list of names on the paper for a long time. Master, isn't this too little? As for the rest, some of them have big families and businesses. They're pretty good. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows. You should go and ask them. How could they have the nerve to write to me after offending me? Among them, there were quite a few who had conflicts with her in the past. Sanson was stunned. Only then did he remember that his master had been attacked by many clans in the world of divine ruins. He suddenly patted his head and was very annoyed. How could he forget about this? Master, please calm down. It's all my fault. Sanson was very embarrassed. Chu Luiyue looked at him with a smile. All right, I know you didn't do it on purpose. Actually, not all of these clans have dealings with me. However, this is just the beginning. If I choose too many clans at once, it will only attract extra attention. Although 4 clans wasn't a small number, it was still feasible as long as the quantity was controlled. In the world of divine ruins, there were many clans that didn't have enough medicinal herbs and elixirs. Many of them had to be bought from outside. However, there had never been a clan that could provide for 4 clans at once. It was appropriate to let people have some guesses so that they wouldn't dare to look down on Peach Blossom Dock. There was no need to do anything more. Sanson suddenly understood and nodded repeatedly. You're right. Then I'll go and reply to these clans. He wiped the sweat off his forehead. Master was so thoughtful. Chu Luiyue nodded. She was at ease with Sanson's work. Sanson then said goodbye and turned to leave. It seems that you already have a lot of plans. Rong Xiu walked over and hugged her waist. resting his chin gently on her shoulder. Chu Luiyue nodded. It's always good to have more friends. After all, she didn't know when the people of Black Demon Cave would make a move. In fact, the people of Black Demon Cave had already suffered several losses at her hands. Especially when Black Sword Sect was completely wiped out. They had suffered heavy losses. No one would be able to tolerate it. However, until now, Black Demon Cave hadn't made any moves. Rong Xiu's lips curled slightly. Don't worry, Mo Shiqian isn't someone who is willing to suffer in silence. Chu Luiyue turned around and asked with interest. It sounds like you know him quite well? Although she had dealings with him before, that person had always been hiding behind the black fog or the mirror. She had never seen his true appearance. Rong Xiu pondered for a moment. You'll get to know him sooner or later. Chu Luiyue was deep in thought. At this moment, the sound of wind suddenly came from the sky. Chu Luiyue seemed to have sensed something and looked up. A muscular snow-white figure quickly pounced over. Chu Luiyue was delighted. Shue shue. Hearing her voice and seeing her face, Shue shue, who had been running around for a long time, suddenly became excited and wanted to pounce on her. In the end, before it could reach him, a cold gaze fell on it. Shue shue froze and quickly braked. In the end, it stopped in the courtyard. At this moment, there was already a thick layer of snow on the ground. It stood there, almost blending into the snow. Only its ice-blue eyes became clearer and brighter. Chu Luiyue waved at it. Shue shue, come here. Speaking of which, she hadn't seen it for a long time. Hearing this, Shue shue jumped up and came to Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu. It first shook off the snow on its body from a distance before walking forward. Chu Luiyue patted its head. Shue shue narrowed its eyes in satisfaction and made a gu sound from its throat. As for its master's gaze, it had completely ignored it. Didn't you hear that my dear you took the initiative to ask it to come over? Where have you been all this time? Chu Luiyue asked with a smile. Shue shue thought for a moment, rolled on the ground, and raised its claws. Only then did Chu Luiyue see that the pads of its claws were still stained with a few coarse grains of sand. She was slightly stunned. You went to the Red Moon Desert? Digression. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1990. Shue shue got up and glanced at her mistress with resentment. It's been so hard on me. Chu Luiyue looked at Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu's expression was gentle. I haven't been back for a while, so I wanted to let Shue shue take a look at the situation in the Red Moon Desert. Chu Luiyue was relieved. That made sense. Ever since Lingxiao College went through a calamity, Dabao had never appeared again. Until now, there had been no news. She had wanted to go and take a look, but unfortunately, she hadn't had the time. It was indeed quite appropriate to let Shue shue go. Thinking of this, she looked at Shue shue. Shue shue, how's the situation over there? A trace of seriousness flashed across Shue shue's eyes, and then it shook its head. Chu Luiyue's heart sank. This means, it said that during this period of time, the seniors haven't come out. Rong Xiu explained. Chu Luiyue frowned even more. Not even on the day of the Red Moon Desert? Shue shue shook its head. It had stayed there for a long time, but it didn't notice anything. In fact, during the entire process, those few people didn't even pay attention to it. According to its previous experience, those few people would definitely react if they knew that it had gone over. It felt that something was wrong, so it rushed back. This was the first time it had returned from the Red Moon Desert so cleanly. Chu Luiyue frowned and fell into deep thought. They must have encountered some trouble in the Red Moon Desert. Then, when you were there, did you encounter any suspicious people or things? Shue shue thought for a moment and shook its head. It was as if nothing had happened there, and it hadn't met anyone. In short, it was like a normal deserted desert. But this was not normal. Chu Luiyue felt uneasy. Putting Diwu Zhangzi and Lan Shao aside, Dabao already had a divine body and could freely travel to and from the divine ruins. He hadn't appeared for such a long time. I'll accompany you to take a look at the situation in the Gate Realm tomorrow. Rong Xiu raised his hand and gently smoothed out the faint traces between her eyebrows. If it's convenient, I'll make a trip to the Red Moon Desert. In any case, they had to enter and exit from the Gate Realm. This was perfect. Chu Luiwei felt a little relieved and nodded. All right. Chu Luiwei almost didn't sleep that night. All sorts of images flashed through her mind. Most of them were related to Dabao and the rest. The moonlight was like water, flowing in through the window. Chu Luiwei lay on his side on the bed and finally opened his eyes. Rong Xiu approached her from behind and pulled her into his arms. Chu Luiwei instantly fell into his warm embrace. Thinking about the past? Rong Xiu's voice was especially low. Chu Luiwei nodded. Yes. After pausing for a moment, she said, "At that time, I was able to break through the Gate Realm and come to Peach Blossom Dock with the help of Dabao and the rest. Speaking of which, it was also a coincidence that she met Dabao and the rest. Back then, when Mu Qinghe led the army to conquer Dahuang Swamp, she secretly followed the army. There was one time when she ran into trouble. In a hurry, she entered Dahuang Swamp and got lost with the others. Later, she met Dabao and the rest. She had learned a lot from them. Even though she had never formally acknowledged them as her master, in her heart, she had always regarded the three of them as her masters. Especially Dabao. He was the strictest to her, but he also taught her the most. It was also their existence that let her know that there was a place like the Divine Ruins realm other than the Tianling dynasty. In the blink of an eye, so much time had passed. Actually, there's something that I've always been puzzled about. Chu Luiwei turned around and placed her hands on his chest. She looked up slightly and said softly, "Dabao and the rest were imprisoned in the Red Moon Desert. But you also know how strong they are. In this world, who is it that has such ability?" She had always been very curious about this matter, but she had never asked. She could feel that Dabao and the rest did not want to tell her so much. Even the fact that Dabao was unwilling to make a move in the Divine Ruins realm seemed to be related to this. Somehow, she felt that something bad had happened this time. Rong Xiu hugged her even tighter and kissed her forehead. "Don't worry, seniors will be safe." Chu Luiwei gently closed her eyes. Definitely." The next morning, Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu went to the Gate Realm together. Lin Qifei and Sun Yi accompanied them. Little Hachi did not seem to be interested in these things, so she did not come this time. After yesterday's investigation, Chu Luiwei sent Wu Yao and Yu Jiu to guard here. The moment they arrived, Chu Luiwei clearly sensed that the Gate Realm had changed compared to the day before. The pressure from above was even stronger than before. The aura it emitted was also more dangerous. This change was actually very subtle. If Chu Luiwei had not been here yesterday and personally investigated it, it would have been very difficult to detect it. This was also why the people in charge of guarding here had only noticed something was wrong so late. Chu Luiwei walked to the Gate Realm. The energy fluctuations above have become more dangerous. Rong Xiu walked forward and held her hand, making her step back while he stood in front. He stared at the Gate Realm for a while, then reached out his hand. Buzz. His fingertips had just touched the light screen when there was a sound. Chu Luiwei's heart seemed to have been grabbed by something. "Be careful." Rong Xiu nodded, then continued to probe inside. Soon, half of his palm was submerged in the light screen. A biting cold aura instantly surged from all directions. It seemed to want to crush his hand. Rong Xiu's gaze sharpened, and a ball of golden flames erupted from his palm. Boom! Intense energy collided with each other. Shortly after, a crack suddenly appeared on the Gate Realm. Chu Luiwei thought that her eyes were playing tricks on her at first glance. However, she saw a second crack appear right after. The faint cracking sound seemed to come from a distant space. Her pupils contracted. Only then did she see clearly that there seemed to be something hidden within the Gate Realm that was suffused with a faint glow. That was a mirror. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from LoveNet. Chapter 1991. The light screen of the Gate Realm was clearly just a thin layer. However, at this moment, the light rippled as if it was bottomless. The mirror seemed to slowly float up from a clear lake. It gradually approached and reflected a figure. Chu Luiwei looked over. A tall figure appeared in the mirror. It was Rong Xiu, but it didn't look like him. Because the person in the mirror, although his appearance and figure were exactly the same as Rong Xiu's, was wearing a black robe. It was clearly the same facial features, but it had a completely different expression and temperament. It was cold and disdainful. With just one look, the invisible pressure seemed to be suffocating. Chu Luiwei was stunned. She felt that it was a little unfamiliar, but there was also an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Crash! The huge mirror shattered with a loud bang. The figure inside also dissipated. Chu Luiwei subconsciously looked at Rong Xiu. He must have seen the scene just now. However, Rong Xiu's expression was calm and grave. The side of his face was handsome and perfect, with smooth lines. There was no change in his expression at all. It was as if he didn't see the scene just now. Or, did he see it but didn't care? Chu Luiwei was about to ask in detail when she suddenly felt a strong force sweeping over from the gate realm. Rong Xiu knitted his brows and pulled her into his arms. Then, the two of them fell into a thick darkness. Master! Your Highness! Xin Yi and Lin Qifei's voices sounded, but they seemed to be very far away. In the boundless darkness, Chu Luiwei could only hear the whistling of the wind, which constantly blew past her ears. Around them, wild energy intertwined and killed each other. It wrapped around the two of them and carried them in an unknown direction. This process didn't last long. Moreover, Chu Luiwei was held tightly in Rong Xiu's arms. With him protecting her, she wasn't injured. After about an hour, a bright ray of light finally tore through the thick darkness. An intense and dazzling light surged from the front. Chu Luiwei turned her face slightly and narrowed her eyes. Rong Xiu hugged her with one hand and covered her eyes with the other. The two of them landed. Chu Luiwei's feet stepped on the sturdy ground, and the floating feeling in her heart finally dissipated a little. At this moment, her eyes had adjusted to the surrounding light. She held Rong Xiu's hand and looked up at the surroundings. When she saw the surroundings, she was first stunned, then she frowned slightly. In front of her was a simple and grand city. Outside the tall and majestic city gate, there was an endless stream of people coming and going. It looked very lively. Behind him was an undulating mountain range and a lush forest. To Chu Luiwei, this was a completely foreign place. Chu Luiwei Rong's frown deepened. How did they end up here after crossing the gate realm? The power in the gate realm is rioting, causing the void to tremble. It's very likely that we were sent here in the chaos. Rong Xiu looked around and quickly took in everything here as he said calmly. Chu Luiwei nodded. This was the most reasonable explanation. However, Xin Yi and Lin Qifei don't seem to have followed us. She had already checked just now. There was indeed no aura of the two of them around. But thinking about it carefully, this was actually normal. After all, the accident happened too suddenly. At that time, she was still thinking about Rong Xiu's figure in the mirror and couldn't react for a moment. If not for Rong Xiu's quick reaction, she would have been separated from Rong Xiu by now. Since we're here, let's take things as they come. Let's go into the city and take a look. Rong Xiu said. Chu Luiwei exhaled softly and nodded in agreement. They had to know where they were before deciding what to do next. She was about to walk forward when Rong Xiu suddenly pulled her back. Don't move. What's wrong? Chu Luiwei was stunned. Rong Xiu's lips curled up slightly. Are you really going to go over like this? Chu Luiwei came to a realization. Their current appearance was indeed a little eye-catching. There were many unknowns ahead, so it was better to be cautious. 15 minutes later, the two of them finished disguising themselves and completely changed their appearances. Their appearances were ordinary, and their clothes were ordinary. At a glance, they were unremarkable. Fortunately, the two of them were at the edge of the forest, and almost no one passed by them. Therefore, their actions were very concealed. After confirming that everything was ready, the two of them looked at each other and walked towards the city gate hand in hand. The closer they got, the more people there were around them, and the more lively the atmosphere became. As Chu Luiwei walked, She quietly looked around and realized that most people were heading towards the city. Moreover, they were all very young. Most of them were in their teens and 20s, and only a few looked to be around 30 years old. Moreover, these people's faces were full of undisguised anticipation and excitement. It was as if there was something full of temptation waiting for them in the city. Chu Luiyue vaguely felt that this scene was a little familiar. Doesn't it look like Fang State City? Rong Xiu's voice suddenly fell into her ears. Chu Luiyue looked up, and the two of them looked at each other. She suddenly understood. That's right. It did look a little similar to Fang State City. In Fangzhou City, there were also many youthful faces full of vigor. But that was because Fang State City was next to Lingxiao College. Those people were so excited because they looked forward to Lingxiao College. And now, a city that did not seem to have anything special about it. Why was it also like this? These people seemed to be quite talented. After looking for a while, Chu Luiyue discovered this point and couldn't help but feel a little strange. This was outside the world of divine ruins. It was reasonable to say that the overall talent and standard of cultivators were slightly inferior to those cultivators in the world of divine ruins. However, among the young people who walked past them, there were quite a few who had outstanding talent and strength. The closer they got to the city gate, the stronger this feeling was. Chu Luiyue became more and more puzzled. Even in the imperial capital of the Tianling dynasty, there might not be so many talented people with great potential. Walking to the city gate, the two of them finally stood still. Chu Luiyue looked up. On the city gate, two words were engraved. Yun State. The handwriting was strong and deep, as if it contained an astonishing aura. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. It was reasonable to say that such a city should be quite famous. But she had never heard of it. She looked at Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu shook his head gently. Obviously, he hadn't heard of it either. Chu Luiyue looked around and muttered in a low voice. No one is in charge of guarding the city. Everyone was completely free to enter and leave. Ha! Since the day the cloud plains appeared, no one had been guarding it. The two of you have already come here. Don't tell me you don't know anything about it? A young voice came from behind. Chu Luiyue looked back and saw a few young men and women standing behind them. The one who spoke was a young man standing at the front. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1992. The young man had a strong build, dark skin, and a chiseled face. He looked very straightforward. Rong Xiu smiled. We are indeed new here, so there are many things we don't know. I wonder if this brother can help me clear up my doubts? Although he had put on a complete disguise and looked ordinary, and his noble aura was almost completely concealed, when he spoke, he was polite and courteous, neither servile nor overbearing. It was very easy for people to have a good impression of him. We don't have that much time. A young woman behind the young man suddenly said. She was quite beautiful. She was dressed in luxurious clothes and exquisite makeup, and her eyebrows and eyes were like a painting. At this moment, she looked at Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue with undisguised impatience. Brother, let's hurry up and enter the city. It won't be good if we're late. She walked to the young man's side and hugged his arm coquettishly. The black-faced young man looked a little hesitant. They were indeed a little late. If they were delayed any longer, seeing this, Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows and chuckled. It seems that you are in a hurry. We won't disturb you. With that, he turned around and was about to leave. Hey! The black-faced young man hurriedly called out to Rong Xiu. Brother, please don't mind her. My sister has always been outspoken and has no ill intentions. Since we've met, it's fate. Why don't we go together and talk about it on the way? He had a feeling that although the two in front of him looked very ordinary, there was a hint of nobility in their movements. It seemed that they were not ordinary. Most importantly, he couldn't see their strength. The people who came to Yun State could be said to be hidden dragons and crouching tigers. It was better to make friends than to make enemies. As soon as he said that, the woman behind him and the others were a little puzzled. Why did brother seem to be so generous to these two? But since he said so, they naturally couldn't refute. Rong Xiu looked at Chu Luiyue. Madam, Chu Luiwei smiled slightly. I'll listen to my husband. Rong Xiu nodded. Then I'll have to trouble you all. There was no one guarding the city gate, so everyone could enter and leave as they pleased. Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu also entered Cloud State City with this group of people. The roads in the city extended in all directions, and it was bustling with activity. Walking among them, they were not eye-catching at all. Both sides exchanged greetings and introduced themselves. The black-faced youth was called Hiziji, and the people behind him were his relatives and friends. They had come to the Cloud State to participate in the trial. Trial? Hearing this, Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. The Cloud State didn't look very big, but it was able to attract so many young cultivation geniuses to come here for the trial. Obviously, there was something fishy going on. Yeah. This was already the third trial held in the Cloud State. I heard that this trial will last for a month, and it will officially begin tomorrow. If he was a day later, he wouldn't be able to make it in time. If you miss it, you'll have to wait for another half a year. Hiziji explained. This trial, is it very important? Rong Xiu asked back. Hiziji looked at him in surprise, as if it was very abnormal that Rong Xiu didn't know anything about this. Of course, Hiziji emphasized. If you can pass the trial, you will be qualified to enter the Gate Realm. Enter the Divine Ruins world to cultivate. Countless cultivators in the world are scrambling for it. As he said that, he lowered his voice. Do you know the Empress of the Tianling dynasty? She entered the Divine Ruins world from here. Chu Luiwei coughed violently. Digression, Aunt Meng is still sleeping? I'll come back at 6 o'clock. I was wrong. My computer is broken. I used my cell phone to send it, but it automatically canceled the section. I owe you an update. I'll start updating tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1993. There was no one else who could eat melons on their own heads. Hiziji and the others looked at her in confusion. Chu Luiwei waved her hand. Cough, it's nothing. I just suddenly choked. However, where did you guys get this news? Why didn't she know that she had used this method to enter the Divine Ruins world? You guys don't know about this? Hiziji and the others' gazes became even stranger. Hizailan curled her lips slightly and said disdainfully, Big brother, only the people with status in the few great dynasties know about this. Who knows where they came from? It's normal that they don't know. Chu Luiwei, even though she had always been sharp-tongued, she couldn't think of anything to refute this time. She touched her nose and ignored her man's somewhat mocking gaze. We have naturally heard of the name of the Tianling dynasty's princess. Rong Xiu didn't seem to care about Hizailan's words and chuckled softly. But we have always lived in seclusion before, so we have never heard of this matter. Hiziji frowned and looked at his sister with a warning look. It was indeed a bit too much to say such words in front of others. Fortunately, the other party didn't seem to mind. Hizailan snorted softly, but didn't dare to be presumptuous again. Hiziji pondered for a moment. It seemed that these two people really didn't know anything. He asked tentatively. Then, do you two know about the Divine Ruins world? Rong Xiu nodded. Hiziji heaved a sigh of relief. Knowing this, it wasn't difficult to explain. It's a long story. More than a year ago, the Tianling dynasty's princess, Shangguanyu, broke through the Door realm and entered the Divine Ruins world. Moreover, it was said that she was still doing well in the Divine Ruins world and was famous. Everyone yearned for it, so naturally, they all wanted to imitate her. However, how could it be so easy to enter the Divine Ruins world? Many people begged for it, but there was no way in. It was only when the trial in the Cloud State began that they were given a rare opportunity. It was said that breaking through to the High God realm was a piece of cake in the Divine Ruins world. Therefore, everyone was rushing to Yunzhou. Tomorrow was the day of the third trial. Therefore, the entire Yunzhou city was bustling with activity. This explanation was easy to understand. However, Chu Luiwei still frowned. Because there was a crucial problem in all of this. How did the news of her going to the Divine Ruins world get out? She did not deliberately publicize this matter, so there were not many people outside the divine ruins who knew about it. How did it spread to such an extent that it was causing such an uproar? There were even rumors that she was doing extremely well in the divine ruins world. Someone was deliberately leaking this information. But what was the purpose? If she had not come here today, she would not have known that such a situation had occurred outside the divine ruins world. It was clear that the enemy's primary target was not her, but cultivators like Hiziji and the others. Chu Luiwei looked around and asked in a seemingly casual manner. Since they're all here for cultivation, why are all the young cultivators here? Why aren't there anyone else? Hiziji laughed heartily. Naturally, it's because only cultivators under the age of 35 can participate in the trial. Furthermore, the younger one was, the better one's talent was, and the better one's results would be in the trial. This rule is a little strange. Chu Luiwei thought to herself. Generally speaking, only when the academy recruited students or the sect selected disciples would there be a limit to the age of the cultivators. She did not know what kind of situation this trial was. There was actually such a rule. It's also because of this that many young cultivators are flocking to this place. Hiziji said. Naturally, this was also the reason why they were here. Seeing that Rong Xiu and Chu Luiwei were deep in thought, Hiziji thought that they were also tempted. He raised his hand and pointed forward. Yes, that heavenly Yin mountain is the place for tomorrow's trial. Brother Bai Li, if the two of you want to participate, you can go there tomorrow. Rong Xiu and Chu Luiwei were both using aliases. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. Go directly? That's right. As long as you are not over 35 years old and have reached a certain level of talent and strength, you can participate in the trial after passing the gatekeeper's test. Gatekeeper? That's right. The most outstanding batch of people selected from the trial will be able to follow the gatekeeper to the divine ruins world. As Hiziji spoke, his face revealed a hint of longing. It could be seen that he was indeed filled with anticipation for this matter. Rong Xiu's expression became somewhat meaningful. It seemed that this trial was specially organized by someone. That's right, the other party deliberately attracted so many talented cultivators, so they naturally had to make all the arrangements. However, Hiziji and the others did not realize what Rong Xiu was thinking. They only thought that he was still thinking about participating in the trial. As they spoke, the group walked to the door of an inn. The trial would begin tomorrow, so they naturally had to rest well today. Hiziji and the others chose to stay here. Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu were too lazy to bother and also stayed. After the two sides said goodbye, they each returned to their own rooms. Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu's rooms were on the 3rd floor, facing the street. When they opened the window, they could see the bustling crowd on the street. Looking into the distance, they could see row upon row of houses in the city, as well as, in the distance, the towering heavenly Yin mountain. Chu Luiwei crossed her arms and leaned against the window coffin. She could not help but smile. I didn't expect that after so many troubles in there, it's still like this when I come out. I've been away for so long, but there are still people thinking about me. Rong Xiu poured a cup of tea. White mist rose in spirals, enshrouding his handsome face. Madam is too outstanding, that's why people can't forget you. Chu Luiwei snorted softly. I don't think it's a good thing to be remembered like this. Someone was deliberately revealing her whereabouts, but she did not even know who the other party was. She really did not like the feeling of the enemy being in the dark while she was in the light. I have always felt that the appearance of this Yunzhou is very strange. Chu Luiwei raised her hand, and her slender white fingernails lightly scratched the hollow wooden window. Her eyes flashed. Although the entire city looks quite old, many places in the city have obviously just been renovated. Look, even the paint on the window is newly painted. But the workmanship is very meticulous. Everything looked tidy, clean, and simple. Most people would not be able to tell. What's more, most of the people who came here were cultivators participating in the trial. Who would pay attention to this? Rong Xiu picked up the teacup, lowered his eyes, and put it down again with a half-smile. Maybe, it was not an accident to come here from Peach Blossom Dock? Mobile users, Please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1994. Chu Liuyue's eyes lit up. You mean, the gate realm leads directly to this place? Rong Xiu's smile deepened. We'll know when we go to the heavenly Yin mountain tomorrow. The entire cloud state was immersed in excitement and excitement. Early in the morning, Chu Liyue was woken up by all kinds of noises outside. He could even hear a few familiar voices outside the door. Big brother, are you really going to ask those two to come with us? He Xylin asked arrogantly. I think they don't even know what this trial is, so they probably won't go. Let's not bother about them. She really didn't like those two. Their appearances and clothes were clearly very ordinary, but when they saw them, they didn't show any respect at all. She really didn't know what was so good about those two. He Ziji glanced at her. More friends means more paths. Why don't you understand this principle? Why don't I understand? I think Big Brother is the one who's confused. If they really participate in the trial, won't they become our competitors? Who would find themselves competitors? He Ziji shook his head and didn't intend to continue persuading her. His sister didn't have a bad heart, but she was spoiled, willful, and narrow-minded. There were so many people who came to participate in the trial, and there were almost countless competitors. What difference would one or two more people make to the result? On the contrary, if he could rope them in, he might have a higher chance of winning in the final competition. He had a feeling that these two people weren't so ordinary. Thinking of this, he Ziji walked over. Just as he raised his hand and was about to knock, the door was pulled open from the inside. A tall figure appeared in front of him. He Ziji's movements froze. Brother Bailey, why you're already up? From the looks of it, what they said just now had probably been heard. He Ziji was embarrassed. Rong Xiu only nodded with a normal expression. My wife and I also plan to go to the heavenly Yin mountain today. He Ziji looked at him and found that he didn't seem to have any intention of pursuing the matter. He couldn't help but secretly sigh in relief. He didn't know why, but in front of this man, he always felt an inexplicable sense of reverence. Even though the other party had always been very polite and courteous, the natural nobility and pressure that seemed to come from his bones was still hard to ignore. Then let's go together. When the time comes, we can take care of each other. What does Brother Bailey think? He Ziji asked nervously. That couldn't be better. Chu Liyue walked up from behind and said with a smile. He Ziji was slightly taken aback. He didn't notice it yesterday, but now that he was standing close to her, he realized that this woman actually had a pair of extremely beautiful eyes. Especially when he smiled. As soon as this thought flashed through his mind, Rong Xiu turned around and reached out his hand to Chu Liyue. He conveniently blocked He Ziji's line of sight. Only then did He Ziji come to his senses. He immediately retracted his gaze, feeling vexed in his heart. It wasn't as if he had never seen a beautiful woman before, so it was rather rude of him to do so. He took a step back. Then shall we go over now? Otherwise, there will be a lot of people on the street later. The moment they stepped out of the door, Chu Liyue and Rong Xiu realized what He Ziji meant. Because the number of people on the street was much more than yesterday. It was still early in the morning. In a while, it would really be crowded. Chu Liyue looked at the lively crowd and suddenly said, There are so many people here. Quite a number of people have come. I'm afraid that many geniuses from various empires have rushed over, He Xylin sneered. Of course. As a cultivator, who doesn't want to cross the gate realm and enter the divine ruins world and become a high god expert? Even if the hope was slim and there were many difficulties, there were still people who came one after another. As she spoke, she scanned Chu Liyue from head to toe and snorted. People like you basically have no chance. When Chu Liyue and Rong Xiu came, they had deliberately suppressed their cultivation bases. He Xylin only thought that the two of them were not high in cultivation, so she did not put them in her eyes. Chu Liyue was not angry at this, and only smiled indifferently. Her purpose for coming here was different from theirs. Seeing Chu Liyue's reaction, He Xylin felt as if her fist had landed on cotton. She was a little angry, so she simply snorted coldly and did not say anything else. However, at this moment, Chu Liwei suddenly said softly, "So you're saying that those who had the best results in the trial all entered the Divine Ruins world?" "Of course." He Xylan replied resolutely. "If not for that, why would so many people come to the Cloud region?" This woman's question was truly laughable. Just as she was about to ridicule him a little more, she heard Chu Liwei continue, "Then have those people ever returned after entering the Divine Ruins world?" He Xylan was stunned, and then looked at her as if she was looking at a monster. "Of course not. After going to the Divine Ruins world, who would return here?" The Divine Ruins world was an existence that everyone yearned to go to. If one had the opportunity to go there, break through the shackles and become a high god powerhouse, or even stronger, how many cultivators yearned for this the most? Who would return? A dark light flashed in Chu Liu's eyes, but it disappeared in an instant. He Xylan wanted to say something else, but she was pulled by He Ziji, so she could only shut up. After that, the group did not say anything else and just continued forward. There were more and more people around them. Mixed in the crowd, they were not very eye-catching. They were like drops of water merging into a river, swept in the direction of the heavenly Yin mountain. After about an hour, they finally arrived at the foot of the heavenly Yin mountain. The terrain here was open, and everyone stood in groups of 3 to 5. From afar, it was a vast expanse of darkness. There were at least 500 to 600 people. Furthermore, these people could be considered rare cultivation geniuses outside of the Divine Ruins. Even Chu Liwei had never seen so many talented young cultivators gathered together in the Tianling dynasty. There should be a lot of cultivators from the dynasty here. But with so many people gathered together, it was not noisy. Most people did not speak much, and only a few whispered a few words. There was an inexplicable tension in the atmosphere. Obviously, they were all quite concerned about the trial that was about to begin. Chu Liu's gaze swept across the crowd intentionally or unintentionally. She actually wanted to see if there were people from the Tianling dynasty here. Suddenly, her eyes narrowed. In the crowd in the distance, there was a young man standing alone. He was only wearing a loose gray linen shirt, and there were no extra accessories on his body. His already thin figure became even thinner. Her soft, short, golden hair glowed faintly under the morning sun. Chu Liu's heart suddenly jumped. Xiao Zhou. Digression, 6:30 a.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.